Welcome to everyone who's with us today. This is the South African Chamber of Commerce from the UK. This is our first live webinar of the year, having had a Christmas break and a New Year break, recharged our batteries, and we now have a massive energy for the year ahead. We tend to run about 100 events a year, in person and by webinar, and you are the welcome ones to be the first to kick off with us. I'm Sharon Constanson. I am chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and I have with me today one of my colleagues, which is Jonathan Rosenthal, who's one of the directors of the chamber. So welcome, Jonathan. You're here to join us. Jonathan, in a moment, will introduce our panel, who are going to talk on the Nigerian elections. Our esteemed panel, and Jonathan, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and hello to the audience and hello to our panelists. I'm Jonathan Rosenthal from The Economist, as Sharon said, and from the Chamber, and it is absolutely my great pleasure to be moderating this discussion. We're about a month away from what is going to be the most momentous election in Africa this year, and arguably one of the most momentous elections in Nigeria in a long time. It is a potential second change of power from one party to another, possibly, which would be the second only since the restoration of democracy in Nigeria, and it also comes at a crucial time. Nigeria, obviously, most populous country on the continent, biggest economy, and yet land of huge opportunity, but yet has also been struggling with a lot of problems. So we're going to talk about some of those, as well as what solutions we may see coming out of this election. To introduce our panelists, we've got Cheta Nwanze, who is the lead partner at SBM Intelligence. He heads the research desk there. It is one of the highly regarded outfits doing analysis, as well as all sorts of other interesting kind of polling and interesting work in Nigeria. He's a former journalist, which makes him close to my heart. We also have Tunde Odunuga, who is, apart from sort of a long and distinguished career in the UK as a statistician, has a history of activism and close watching of Nigeria. So welcome to both of them. I'm going to open this up perhaps with a question to Cheta, which is just, could you briefly give us a bit of an overview of sort of what is the current situation in Nigeria right now? What is the security situation? What is the economic situation? What are some of the challenges?
Thank you, John, for having me. Good morning, everybody. The situation in Nigeria right now, in one word, is bad. Insecurity is at a level that we've not seen ever, to be honest. Because even during the Civil War was basically restricted to two of the six geopolitical zones we have in the country. The South and the Southeast. It didn't really go beyond there except for two skirmishes. Now insecurity around the country is widespread. We have the Nigerian army deployed in 36 of the country's 36 states, basically doing policing in one form or the other. And as a result of that insecurity, a lot of other things are not functioning as they should. Inflation is at very high levels, north of 20%. Food inflation, which is the biggest component of inflation, is in real terms approaching 30%. Unemployment is high. It's so high that the Statistics Office has not been funded to do an unemployment survey since Q4 2020, when it was officially 33%. Youth unemployment was 42.5% at the time. Some people believe, we believe, SBM Intelligence, through our own surveys, we feel that youth unemployment is now north of 50%, and real unemployment for the whole country is north of 40%. So then electricity is a problem, has always been a problem, but it's even worse. We are reconsidering work from home in the office because a lot of people are no longer able to effectively work from home because of electricity problems. And you have a situation where effectively governance has stopped. the president who is leaving at the end of May, regardless, doesn't seem concerned about what is happening around the country, and things are just on autopilot. Politicking has taken over in full at least since September. So Nigeria is not in a very good place. In terms of the election, we have, for the first time since 1979, we have 3 candidates at the top of the tickets. And like in 1979, 3 of them are from the 3 major ethnic groups in the country. This brings an added dimension in Nigeria's kind of politics, because ethnic politics is something that people get very emotional about. So the front runner from our point of view is the ruling party's candidate, Bola Tinubu, who is Yoruba from the southwest of the country. His closest challenger at the moment is Igbo, Peter Obi. He's from the southeast of the country. And then the third person is Atiku Abubakar, former vice president to President Obasanjo between 1999 and 2007, who is from the north, which is essentially from Buhari's part of the country, and a lot of angst against him from the south, because people in the south expect that power, after 8 years of a northern president in Buhari, that power should go back to the south. And I think a final thing that I should add is that we've had petrol scarcity in Nigeria for months now, and nobody has said anything about it, or not much has been said about it from the ruling party. So people are increasingly beginning to question why, with such a record, the ruling party has even bothered to put a candidate forward. But that's Nigeria's dynamics for you.
Thanks, Cheta. That's very useful. Tunde, I'm going to come to you now. So Cheta slightly outlined who the 3 candidates are. Could you tell us a bit more about each of them, what their manifestos are, and I suppose whether you agree with Cheta about where they are in the running?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jonathan. Yeah, as Cheta, pointed out in earlier on, looking at their manifestos, starting with Bola Tinubu, like you said, is the front runner. There are similarities, of course, and some of these things are hinged on their previous experiences and the drafters of the manifestos, either for Peter Obi, Dr. Rabi Kwakwanso, that's the New Nigeria's People Party. Peter Obi, of course, is the Labour Party, which is a 72-page document. So it's possible. You have Bola Ahmed Tinubu, 80-page document again, as part of the manifesto, with the policies on empowerment for youth, economy, farmers, giving loans, electricity generation, and some of the things that they will do. And when you look across all the manifestos of this party, including the former vice president, of course, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, so you find a lot of similarities, like saying it's going to give 10 billion loan, as for small scale businesses and all of that. But beyond the manifestos, I think what I would expect from everyone and for keen watchers of the Nigerian politics is how are these being tested? How are the various groups that are concerned, the manufacturers, the youth, and all the other people, people within the various sectors of the economy, have they really tested these manifestos that have been pushed forward by the various political candidates vying for presidency in the country? What sort of engagement have they done, to really prune and scrutinize them on the things that they are promising the people? Because it's not just about manifesto, it's about what are you going to do? How do you intend to actualize some of the things that you are saying that you want to do as a candidate? So yeah, that for me is the key issue. And for example, the presidential candidates of the NNP has about 162-page document. So that's something to tell you what all of these manifesting to. But my point will be, how are they engaging with the stakeholders? So the manufacturers, the farmers, the women, the youth, and everyone else, to really tell us how do they want to do it. And also those who are concerned, how have they been able to scrutinize and say, we don't think this your manifesto will work. And that's the sort of thing that I've seen missing in most of the campaigns that I've been seeing, even from some of the interest group that I've said. So, well, overall, like Cheta said, yeah, some of these things are quite in place. We have challenges as a country, but I'm just one person that I've seen so many, and I don't believe we should all be saying everything is just doom and gloom. So, there are some things that you can take away from this present government. The current president is not contesting as a person. He's leading government. Of course, he will support his party, the APC, but that to me doesn't mean that everything has stopped as a government. So there are still things that are going. And for example, he did mention that none of his present cabinet should be involved in any political campaign. And we haven't seen any one of them so far. So the vice president has not been part of any political campaign as far as I can see. And he himself maybe occasionally, in few states. So the affairs of the government is still very much in place. And like every other election cycle, this period is not new. We always see a slow in the way things have been done, and whenever there's any transition going on. So we'll expect that to happen. But the point is the electorates must be engaged. The manifestos of these candidates must be scrutinized by the various interest groups and all of that. So that's what I will expect to see going forward more.
I'm going to put something to both of you, which is let's sort of actually look at the candidates, not just their manifestos.
Yeah.
We've come out of a period of a presidency that I think has been widely criticized. He was out of the country for a long time. Of course, we're talking about President Buhari. Because of illness in his first term, he was slow in getting things moving. In general, he's been sort of characterized as not very effective in terms of governance.
Yeah.
If we take your both of your view that Tinubu is the front runner and may well be president, what sort of president would he be? Do we worry about his age? Do we worry about his health? And then, what do we know about his ability to be an efficient president who can start getting things done?
Tinubu was governor of Lagos State between 1999 and 2007 as former governor of Lagos State. And I know for sure, and people who were in Lagos then and even now. So of course, starting from his age, it wasn't the same Tinubu that we used to have 16 or however many years ago. So he's now 70. Of course, we wouldn't expect him to be as agile and fit as he was then. So people can have concerns about their challenges, but I would say the same, for people in the past as well. Other candidates, have had issues with their health challenges and all of that. But we still see now, running his campaigns all over the country, people express worries about some of the things that are coming up from the campaign, which are quite legitimate. But the point remains that looking at his past antecedent as a former governor, the things he was able to do, and don't forget, all of these presidential candidates, but the vice presidential candidates, the former vice president Alhaji Atiku, are basing their campaign presently on their precedents. That is what they've done while they were governors. Three of the four front runners, if I may add, from what Cheta said, is also including Dr. Rabi Kwakwanso, was a former governor of Kano, current, senator from Kano Central, Bola Tinubu, former governor of Lagos State, and Peter Obi, also former governor of Anambra State. So all of them, they've based their own campaigns on what they've done in the past as former governors. And Tinubu has his own too. He made changes in Lagos, and people applauded him for what he has done. But of course, you don't always need to agree with his policy or a way of doing things. But largely, all the things that we've seen in Lagos has been attributed to his astuteness, his understanding of the politics, his financial engineering. And Lagos was in a bad place. IGR from about 600 million to billions of naira, and that's what he's saying is going to bring to the table for Nigeria, as that you can use Lagos as a microcosm of what Nigeria is, and don't forget, Lagos is the economic bedrock of Nigeria as a country, and he's saying he's going to do that on a large scale. And the same goes for Peter Obi. He's coming up to say, well, look at what I've done in Anambra. For the 8 years that I was there, I was able to save money, and it's really now to all the achievements he has done as a former governor. So those are things that will be tested, and people will need to scrutinize and say, well, we've seen what you've done, all of you in the past, and even the former vice president as well, saying he headed the economic council and what some of the transformation that happened during when he was vice president between 1999 and 2007. So these are some of the things that I expect that people will decide on whether they want to go for which of the candidates. And for me, I think the whole point is, who did they trust most to deliver on their promises going forward in 2013 and beyond?
Thanks, Tunde. Cheta, do you share that view?
I share some of it. I disagree with some of it, as is natural with politics. Let's start with Mr. Tinubu's age. I don't think that 70 is too old to be president of Nigeria. After all, the retired General Obasanjo became president at almost 70, 68, and he was very agile throughout his period, and he's still very agile today. So when people talk about Mr. Tinubu's age as a negative, I disagree with them. My main concern really is his health. As far as I can see, and as far as sources have told me, Mr. Tinubu is not in the best of health. That for me is problematic, especially given our recent history. So it's not just Buhari who disappeared for long periods when he was president. The previous president, Umaru Yar'Adua, disappeared for long periods as well and eventually died in office. And unfortunately, given the Byzantine way that Nigerian political system is structured, I think it's very important for us to put this in perspective. We used to be a military dictatorship. We have transitioned for the past 23 years, 24 years now, to a democracy. But some of the holdovers from military dictatorship are still with us. So you have a serious concentration of power around the person of the president. And people tend to are capable of wielding power in the name of the president if the president is indisposed. We saw this under Yar'Adua. We saw this under Buhari. And I'm worried that if Tinubu really does have those health concerns that credible sources have said that he does have, then are we going to have that again? So that for me is a big worry. And one of the things that supports this is the way his campaign has been run. Yes, he has attended campaign rallies around the country, but in almost all the campaign rallies that he's attended, there's been one or two blunders that he's made, which his political opponents have seized upon. And some of those blunders give the impression of a man who is not fully in control of his surroundings. Another thing that is a red flag for me is the fact that he has refused to attend any debates directly against the candidates. And for want of a better word, the debacle at Chatham House a few weeks ago, where he basically parried questions and assigned people to respond to them on his behalf. That wasn't something that gave a good look. Now, it is true that everybody will run on their previous record, and Tinubu's record as governor of Lagos was good. Mr. Obi's record as governor of Anambra was also good, and Mr. Atiku's record as vice president of Nigeria was very decent. Mr. Kwankwaso's record as governor of Kano was also very good. The reason that not many people put Kwankwaso as a front runner is that outside of his base in Kano, Kwankwaso does not have too much to ride on. So he's in almost every list. He's number 4 by some distance. Now, going back to Lagos, there's one thing that a lot of people tend to ignore with respect to Lagos. Lagos was federal capital for 87 years. So it had already built a major base to start from. Anybody who was governor of Lagos already had a head start. It's kind of like starting a football match 3-0 up. So because of that, I don't really take that into I don't really take that as a huge advantage, for the simple fact that Lagos, even till today, I live in Lagos, so we still have hours-long traffic jams for a start. Today, President Buhari is in Lagos, and a lot of people have effectively shut down from work because of the president's presence means that traffic is going to be very nightmarish. So I think those things are very important to bring into perspective. Having said that, because of the nature of my job, I will not vote. But were I to vote, I would. I don't know who I would vote. I would have voted between Mr. Obi or Mr. Atiku. I would not vote for Mr. Tinubu, not because of him as a person, but for the simple fact that, in my personal opinion, the APC has not done well as a political party over the last 8 years. So I would want to send a message to them that you don't perform poorly and expect another reward. But that's just my opinion.
I'm going to push you on that one, and then also invite Tunde to come in. But I suppose one of the striking things about this race is that what has in the past been, in general, been a two-horse race with the two big parties is now been overturned by the emergence of Peter Obi. One of the questions from the floor is asking about the significance of former President Obasanjo's endorsement of Peter Obi, given the fact that he is seen as one of the sort of more effective former presidents in recent history. Is that going to shift things? And secondly, the polling that came out very early put Peter Obi up front, which I think surprised many people. Does that still hold? Is more recent polling showing that? And can a person without the heft of one of the two big parties, make his way to the front?
Okay, that's three questions in one. Let's start with the first one, Mr. Obasanjo. Mr. Obasanjo is someone who has he's highly regarded internationally. But at the local political level, and when I say local, I'm going down to the very bottom of the Nigerian political system. He doesn't have much heft. So, for example, during his period as president, he never won his own polling units, his own ward. So, yes, Mr. Obasanjo has a lot of influence. There's no, that cannot be taken away from him. Internationally, for example, his recent actions in helping to stop the war in Ethiopia and Tigray show that he's very highly regarded. And there are a lot of people in Nigeria who will listen to him. However, like many of such leaders of his kind, Mr. Obasanjo also arouses a lot of controversy. There are a lot of people in Nigeria who do not like him. So I think that from a moral perspective, Obasanjo's endorsements helped Peter Obi a lot, but it doesn't shift the needle really. Now, coming to the question of the polls, one of the problems with polling is that it's expensive. So many of the organizations who have done polling, what you would expect in an ideal situation is that polling will be something that will be done at least once a month. I think the most prominent of all the polls is the ANAP poll, which was done by the NY Foundation, the NY polls for ANAP. ANAP is a foundation that is run by a local businessman, very successful local businessman at Edo Peterside. The ANAP polls, two of them show Peter Obi in front, but something that I consider to be closer to reality is that by the second poll, the gap had closed. I also worry about the Bradley effect on those polls because you find that an undue number of people claims to be undecided, which for me is kind of like it's an aha moment in many respects. You can't, in my view, you can't have something so contentious, so controversial, and people will claim to be undecided. I think that a lot of people are claiming undecided because they don't want to tell pollsters who they are going to vote. And in my view, that is favorable to the incumbent party. Having said that, my organization has done quite a lot of, because we have people around the country who speak to people a lot. And in our view, Mr. Tinubu is the front runner. And part of it is because of the structures that the APC has around the country. Now, it's important to point out something. In a country like Nigeria, and I think in most democracies anyway, you cannot overstate the role of money. Money buys influence, and influence pushes people. There are 176,000 polling units around the country. The APC has people in each of those polling units. The PDP can also get people into each of those polling units. Labour Party cannot. And that is very critical. On election day, that will sway people. Those are things that you cannot see in a poll. Those are realities on the ground that a poll cannot show. So again, I would say that Mr. Tinubu, on the grounds of being the incumbent, is the front runner. But of course, we still have a full month, 5 weeks to the election. A lot could shift. in that period. There could be, it is possible that Mr. Tinubu, going back to the health concerns I raised earlier, could have a major gap. One of the candidates lower down the ladder, Yele Sowore, a few days ago, published pictures of Mr. Tinubu sleeping off at a campaign events. Those pictures, if they make their way through social media, can be very damaging and could be very embarrassing, and could end up swaying people, especially if people begin to think of, we don't want somebody else in the villa who cannot effectively function because he's not well.
Thank you. Tunde, do you
yeah, I agree
disagree?
with on the last point, that Tinubu is the front runner. Yeah, that's true. And he also mentioned the fact that because of the structures he has on ground. And let me just quickly point it out this one. It's not in the history of Nigeria since the transition to 1999. It has not happened that you have a party that has not been in contention before, that doesn't know any political party is members in the National Assembly as a governor that has come to win an election as a president. It has not happened since 1999. So that one is very clear. So looking at the current dispensation, even like you said, rightly, Labour Party doesn't even have candidates in Gombe, for instance, or they don't have any candidate at all. And there are other places where they don't, have parties maybe partially as a governor or other representative. So that's a big challenge for Labour Party. But in terms of the individual concern, so they're gaining momentum, and that is what is working for Peter Obi based on his personality. This is what he has been able to sell as a person, among the youth and across the various interest groups who are supporting him. And one thing must also be said, and I need to give a brief history of the dynamics of the current four front runners. These are people who have been in parties together at some point or the other since 1999. So they are not new. So Peter Obi was governor under ABGA, a different political party, for 8 years, and he moved to PDP. And he only left PDP about 7-8 months ago. So when Cheta was talking about, he will not vote for one party, but will vote for another party because of, and I wonder what that party has done. Peter Obi was a former vice presidential candidate with Alhaji Atiku Abubakar as the presidential candidate under PDP in the last election 4 years ago. So we must understand these dynamics. Dr. Rabi Kwankwaso is a member of the same PDP, was a member of the same PDP before he started his own NNPP. And I'm not going to just dismiss him. On their website, if what they've have on their website is true, they've registered about 9 million members within the space of how many months? So 6 to 8 months. So that's impressive. So for me, the dynamics are just all interwoven. And my point on that is the fact that it's all down now to individuals. Leave the party. The party in power, of course, have their own issues to deal with because of the perception that they've not done well. And there's so many challenges which is fueling anger among the youth, most especially, and some other interest groups. So that is part of the issue the APC is facing. But when it comes to the individual challenge or the individual assessment of the candidates involved, and that's what makes a difference. Buhari is a converted Democrat, while Tinubu is a true Democrat. So there are differences in their individual, perception or whatever they've done. He has always been a Democrat, and one was a former military leader as the head of state, and now the president. So these are the changes that we need to understand. And the same goes for Peter Obi. When he joined, Labour Party was not known, and they've always had presidential candidates. At some point there was even a Zenith Labour Party, out of the former current Labour Party. So you can understand this, that the only difference within all these political parties in the candidates that they are selling, the individual, what the individual candidates are selling. And talking about polling, I'm a statistician. I've been a statistician for many years. For over 20 years, I've been practicing statistics. I've never seen a flood polling done in a way that has ever been done by either the NOI or the ANAPOL. I looked at the methodologies and I said, okay, let me see what it is. And you cannot poll a country like Nigeria on Twitter and you want to use that as an assessment of what the true situation is on ground. It's never done. I've been in election issues on election ground myself for many years. Such polling is highly flawed. I challenge them to bring out the methodology for such a poll. It's never done. You can't do a polling on Twitter and you want to use that as a basis. I agree with the sample size figures, which is okay, which is quite representative, because for a population of about 9.3 million or 9.4 million voters, if you're taking just 1,000, just for sample size reasons, and you just want that to happen on Twitter, it's never going to be done. What about the Gombe, the youth in Gombe, the youth in Sokoto, the one in Bayelsa? Where's the sample from? So that, for me, is what I quarrel with. You can't use that as a sample. And looking at OBJ's assessment or endorsement, it's not new. He has never shown, or he has never hidden his love and his admiration for Obi's qualities, which is good. And you have gale of endorsements here and there, from individuals, from interest group, across party lines. And people who are in PDP are supporting APC. People in APC are supporting candidates from. So, and Nigerian election, the dynamics again is the gale of defection that you see from one political party to the other. So there is no stability, either from Labour to another party, from APC. So there's no ideology politically, and that brings to the question of the individuals that are contesting in this election that makes a difference. So coming back, and lastly for me, Tinubu is a front runner. He has his health challenges. I'm not his doctor. So I'm not going to say this. They said so much of Buhari when he was there, or when he was contesting, as if he was going to die once he was sworn in as president. But that's what it is, and like he said, and I agree with it. It's not the age that matters, but what is the capacity of the person involved, and what are they going to do when they come into power? And from the antecedent, you can always say yes, one has got more to show than the rest of them in terms of what they built over the years.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask, I suppose, just one last question on sort of where people are in the race, and we can then get on to other sort of substantive issues around policy and investment and the like. But actually, it's two questions. The one is, to what extent does some of these candidates end up playing the role of kingmaker? Kankwazo potentially realizing he's going to come third or fourth and throwing his lot in with one of the other candidates and swinging things in their direction. Question two, and I'm going to put this to both of you as well briefly, if I could ask you to be brief, is Nigeria in the past has had very low voter turnout in recent elections. We've seen a flood of voter registrations. Obviously, some problems around that, people complaining about not getting their cards. But to what extent is this an election in which the youth, who in the past have not voted much, country with a median age of 19 or 20, coming out in force for one or other of the candidates? Is that going to happen this time, or was that something we wait for?
Yeah, thanks very much. Just before I answer, I'll take the second question, but just before I answer that, I think I forgot to mention earlier on that the inclusion of Peter Obi in this election has made it the most interesting. This is why this election is very, very interesting. I need to point that out. If not for Peter Obi in this election, if it is just a straight fight between Atiku Abubakar and Tinubu, the election now would have been won and lost by whoever those candidates are. So Peter Obi's inclusion has made it very interesting, and no one can take that away from him. He has made it interesting, and that's why this election is one of the most keenly contested elections in the history, I would say, of Nigeria. It maybe, well, let's say since we moved back to 1999, the transition program. Then talking about the question you asked, on this second one, which is the issue of the voters. So in this current dispensation, there are about 12.2 million additional voters that were registered. Before 2011, what we used to have is that at every election cycle, we had to go and register everyone. Everyone had to go and register at every election cycle until 2011, when they introduced a case where only those who are newly registered or who are just attaining the age of 18, or those who have not registered before just need to. So there's been a build-up on the register. In 2019, there were about 14.4 million registered additional voters, and that was around 85.4 million. And now, after the registration of 12.2 million, INEC scrutinized the electoral register and were able to weed out maybe 1 point something million out of those 12, 3 point something out of those registered, maybe because of double registration or the underage registrants and all of that, and added 9.45 million. So that made it overall now 93.4 million. But one thing that has never been done is the fact that the inclusion of these youth has not always been the problem. They've always turned out, registration numbers at every point in time. But when it comes to voting, and you mentioned the issue of voter apathy, and this is something I hope will change this time around. And one thing that must be very clear, the idea of youth registration coming up for a particular candidate, I'll say it's not true. All candidates have their youth wing, they have their own political, the PDP, the APC. So it's across party lines that you have youth coming out to support their individual candidate. So on voter apathy, I hope this will not be the case, because one thing that has always been relied on in the past is vote buying. And this is done across party lines, whether there is, no one can take that away. So I hope this is going to be a time where that will change. And from what we've seen, with the innovations and the technology that INEC is bringing into, that's the electoral body, Independent National Electoral Commission, that they are bringing into this election in terms of the beavers and which is at that point where you register your thumbprints and all your biometrics will be taken with your facial recognition, unlike before where you only thumbprints, and that's the only thing they take. But now they've added the facial and, so that makes it even more robust in terms of the database for voters that we have. So hopefully that this election going forward will mark a new beginning of where people will actually turn out to vote, and also the youth, because from the register, about over 20 million of them from the register. So that is enough to tell you who the winner is if they actually vote for one particular party, but that's not going to happen. So we hope there'll be a large turnout, and most especially the women as well, because in the past, they have been the decider. Most of the time, they've always voted more, the women, especially the older ones, they've always voted more than the youth and the rest. So we hope that this election will bring them out, vote for their candidates, and make a difference. Otherwise, there'll be no need to say we have just 23 million youth voter registered, and nothing happens. The voter apathy we see every time. Hopefully this time will be a difference. And like I said, this will be the first time if we have a very high turnout that we will all want to see.
Thanks, Tunde. Cheta, do you see much scope for potential surprises, king-making sort of, alliance shifts, or once, or the youth, or once again, do you still maintain the view that Tinubu's sort of leading the pack and has this in the bag?
So we think that that this election will be the first in Nigeria's history to go to a runoff. And if it goes to a runoff, then two of the other candidates will have to be kingmakers. It will depend on which kind of alliances are struck. So the question will remain, so first things first, I think it's important to look at how a candidate wins an election in Nigeria. There are two things, and this is based on our history, that you have to get. Number one, you have to get a majority of the votes. And number two, you have to get a spread. So which means you have to win at least 25% of the votes in 24 states of the 36. That's 25%, a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of all the states. This is to ensure that the winning candidate has support across the country. This was the result of what happened that led up to the Civil War, where essentially pre-1966, all of our elections were essentially ethnic head counts. So when we were returning to civilian rule in 1979, the people who wrote the Constitution then came up with that requirement so that candidates had to go out to campaign, not just in their own localities, but across the country. However, there's a lot of sentiment, especially in the south of the country right now, that the next president should be a Southerner. That means that either Peter Obi or Bola Tinubu should be the president, not Atiku Abubakar or Rabiu Kwankwaso. So if that prevails, and if we have a situation where either Bola Tinubu or Peter Obi are, we get to a runoff, and one of them is on the runoff against somebody from the north, then there's a very strong possibility that everybody from the south will coalesce behind that southerner or sit out. But having them vote behind a northerner might be, you would see the reduced possibility of that, which means that even the people themselves could become kingmakers. But then one of the two losing candidates in a first round of election could become kingmaker by instructing his supporters to vote for a particular candidate. That will completely depend on the kind of deals that people are able to strike in the 2 weeks after the main election, before the runoff election. As for turnouts, on the 9th of January, we published a report based on a survey that we carried out in December, and we are very definite that turnout will rise. There's a lot more excitement, so I would agree with Tunde on one thing. Well, I've agreed with him on quite a lot, and disagree with him on quite a lot as well. One thing I agree with him on is that there's Peter Obi's emergence has injected a lot of excitement into the campaign. Yes, Peter Obi is a part of the political establishment. He's the former governor of a state. However, there's for some reason a lot of young people have projected their desires onto him. Kind of very similar to how people projected their desires onto President Buhari back in 2014. We are seeing that dynamic play. If the election had been between Bola Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar alone, the traditional two parties, then we would definitely have seen the trend of voter apathy continue. Since 2007, voter turnout has steadily dropped in every election. We would have seen that continue, but this time we are set to buck that trend. What would determine how much of the rise is other things like violence. So, for example, in the survey that we talked about, which we published on the 9th of January, the title of that was voter turnout will rise. 24% of our respondents said that in picking up their voters' cards, they encountered some form of violence or the other. That quota is too much. It's simply too much. So that's fear of violence may make people decide not to come out to vote. Otherwise, that aside, I'm certain that voter turnout will rise.
Thanks, Cheta. Let's just take this a little bit further. There is talk from INEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, about potentially having to postpone the election because of attacks on its offices in the south or southeast. What are the risks of a postponement? As we saw when Buhari won his first term, the election was postponed because of violence in the northeast. A, and B, what are the risks of violence on election day or immediately afterwards? Again, something we have seen in the past when Goodluck Jonathan was elected. We saw some violence in the north.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, postponement of election has become a habit. It's quite an unfortunate habit. Each of the last 3 general elections have been postponed by some time or the other. The 2011 elections were postponed. The 2015 elections were postponed by 6 weeks. The 2019 elections were postponed by a week. So there's a distinct possibility that these elections will be postponed at some point or the other. By how long is anybody's guess? I personally, so this is now completely personal opinion, I don't think they will postpone. And my reason for thinking that they won't be postponed is that I think that President Buhari is personally vested in doing something that his predecessors haven't done, which is delivering an election on time, and making sure that everything just runs. I think he personally thinks that would be a good crowning moment for his presidency. So that's my own personal opinion. Whether realities will dictate otherwise is something that remains to be seen. Having said that, the attacks on INEC's offices, I think, and this is not going to come out very well. I think that the number of offices, if you look at it in stark numbers, it's not enough at this point to force a postponement. Yes, what it will probably mean is that voting will not go on in some areas, but statistically, the number of areas that will happen as a direct result of attacks on INEC infrastructure is insignificant. It won't change the outcome. So INEC may just look at those kind of hard numbers and decide that, okay, this is mainly noise. We can just go ahead without it, without those places. Violence. Now, one of the problems with Nigeria at the moment is that violence is now quite widespread, quite democratized. This has been happening. It's been kind of a boiling frog situation for quite a while now. So the elections will be held within a backdrop of violence. How the violence will affect actual voting remains to be seen. But whether the elections are postponed or not, the violence is still there. So the elections will hold whether there's violence, whether there's no violence. Or I think it's the other way around. Violence or no, we will still have some elections, and there will still be violence whether the elections are postponed, whether the elections are not postponed. The only question that we really have is the scope of violence and how widespread it will be.
Good, thanks. Tunde, have you got anything that you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I think I agree with Cheta on that point. Electoral violence is a key problem, and the INEC, if I'm going to quote the current chairman, Professor Mahmoud, at the Chatham House, where he gave a speech about this issue of electoral, postponement of the election. From what I heard him said correctly, that they are well ahead prepared, and they've had 18 months ahead of time to get themselves to where they are now. So, and he doesn't see any chance that the elections are going to be postponed. So, which is good news for us and for all many Nigerians looking forward to this election. So, I also believe that we might not need to have a reason to postpone this election. And like you said, electoral violence here and there, and this is largely caused by party members and some people who think they just want to have advantage in one locality or the polling unit. And don't let us forget, about not less than 52 INEC offices have been burnt by arsonists or damaged by hoodlums in one form or the other across the country. So that trend portends something, great danger to our electoral process. We don't want to see that. If that trend sort of continues, then there will be, to replace the polling units, and even not that, the staff themselves who are going to be in danger of, at arm's length of getting injured in the process of trying to burn their offices, documents, and all of that. So that will be pivotal in terms of having to delay voting in some part of the country. So we don't want that to happen. So hopefully the security situation and the security agents will be able to rise up to the challenge and secure the electoral offices. And that's what I've seen now, especially in the East, where this has been profound. So hopefully that should not happen going forward. Just to add to my point before I go about the issue of kingmakers earlier on, where Cheta was speaking, in addition to the idea of their projection that this might go as a runoff, the only thing I need to throw into that is the fact that there are 5 governors currently within the opposition party who have yet made up their mind, despite having a presidential candidate in PDP, but they've not really said they are going to go and vote for that candidate. So wherever they go, will be pivotal to whoever they support in terms of becoming president, or depending on where the pendulum swings. So we'll see where that goes. So that is something that we should look forward to if they decide to go with their current presidential candidate. So that will have an implication. And also if they decide to either vote Peter Obi or support Bola Tinubu as well. So that is going to be something that will be quite new in the electoral process. And that's also could be a game changer for whoever they go for eventually.
Let's talk, and time is getting short now, but let's talk briefly in terms of economic policy facing any future government. The fuel subsidy, I think, is widely acknowledged as the biggest policy mistake. Promises to reform it over many years, never happens. Do you think that the next government will be able to tackle this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Whoever comes into power, whoever wins this election should do away with subsidy. Absolutely. Even the current government has said by April, they'll start phasing out subsidy payments and all that. Then this quarter alone, we are going to have like 2 trillion naira of subsidy payments. So, and that takes a huge chunk of the revenue that Nigeria is going to, have within the year. So we have a shortfall. We've been running budget deficit for many months, for many years, and that doesn't look well for us. And whoever is going to come in will have that, challenge of trying to rebuild the economy, do something that will make changes. And if you look across all the party manifesto for all the leading candidates, they've also, alluded to this fact, and they are promising that they are going to take away subsidy. Bola Tinubu has said so. Peter Obi has said so. But one thing that the Labour Party, not the Labour Party, but the Labour, I'm talking about the Nigerian Labour Congress, their own position is quite different from the position of the Labour Party when it comes to the issue of subsidy. So we must get that fact. So the Nigerian Labour Congress is saying that we will support subsidy, but you must put things let's produce locally in terms of the all that we take from Nigeria, take abroad and bring back and sell at exorbitant rate. So there is a problem somewhere. So the subsidy arrangement is very confusing, and in some cases that you call it scam and different names, but the point remains that it does exist. So if the Nigerian Labour Congress can say, well, don't take it off now, but do this before you take it off, or do a phased approach to taking off subsidy, so that the effect, because at the moment you're selling for 170 naira per liter, and that's in a way, if subsidy, and in some other parts of the country, the prices are quite different. It's double the price if you go to a place like Bayelsa, or even triple in some part of the country. So you only find that uniform and stable price in a few places in Lagos and some other places, but elsewhere, the price is already doubled. So people are even paying more with the subsidy in place. So what is the problem with the subsidy? That's something that the new government needs to tackle, and whoever comes in will have that challenge, and maybe if have like a 5-10 year policy that we will need to look forward to, because the truth is that whoever comes in, election won't solve the problem. That's something I want us to all agree with, that this electoral process or the election that will bring in a president by next month is not going to address the issue. That is just a means to addressing the issue. So, and that for me is something that will need to be behind that, and whoever comes in will have to do with subsidy. Absolutely.
So I think we agree on the need. Cheta, is it going to happen? Do you have the same confidence that the next government will tackle this?
I agree that the subsidy has to go. I don't think that the next government will be able to tackle it. It's too politically explosive. There will be an attempt, but it's unfortunately, it's something Nigerians are addicted to, this petrol subsidy. Nigerians are addicted to cheap petrol. So the next president will face social unrest when he attempts to do it. And unfortunately, the current government has actually placed that as a time bomb by kicking the can down the road in terms of subsidy removal. To get rid of the subsidies, there are two main things that the Nigerian government has to change at an institutional level: the addiction to cheap petrol and the need to control the price of the naira against the US dollar, which creates a lot of arbitrage. Those are the two major things that are problematic. But I don't see those changing especially in a cold stocky kind of manner. We need to come up with a very intelligent way to remove those in a phased manner over the course of 4 years. That is what I would, if I were to be president, which is not going to happen for the record, but if I were going to be president, I would come up with a plan to change those two things over the course of 4 years.
We've got 3 minutes left. I'm gonna ask for a 1-minute question. We have lots of South Africans on this call. South African businesses, along with many other international investors, have had some rather difficult times in Nigeria. We've seen investor flight. Do you anticipate the next government being more receptive and understanding of the need for foreign direct investment and how to attract and retain it?
So the next government does not have a choice. It needs foreign investments at the very first level to help solve the unemployment crisis. Having said that, it's something that the approach will be different. depending on who gets into office. And one of the key risks that companies tend to face in Nigeria is regulatory risk. So you could see it, for example, using a South African example, the kind of problems that both DSTV and MTN have faced in Nigeria. Depending on who wins, that kind of behavior will continue, and it would have the unintended consequence of even chasing even more foreign investments out. But we need foreign investment badly in Nigeria, and we will have to change our behaviors towards foreign investors.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. This has to change in terms of whoever comes in as president. Like you said, the MTN, the DSTV, and all other businesses, of South Africa interest will have to be, and it comes back to the idea of the blueprints of the candidates in terms of what are they trying to do when it comes to, increasing FDIs, in the next few years. So there must be something that we can follow and see, like a plan for them to be able to get that in place. So I would expect to see a much more flexible approach, and also in terms of the way they bring business, not just from South Africa, but from other countries as well in Africa and beyond. So there must be something that will make them welcome and see their investment grow here in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to thank the audience. Some of you, a number of you sent through questions that have been very helpful. So thank you for your engagement and your time. But most of all, I would like to thank our two panelists, Cheta and Tunde, for your not just your time, but your very insightful comments, your forthrightness, your honesty, and I think cutting analysis. So if we were in the room, I would ask people to join me in giving you a clap, but we'll have to do that virtually. Thank you very much. Sharon, to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was very insightful. Not knowing as much about Nigeria as you do, I found it very interesting. I try and do business there and find it very challenging. I'm in the foreign exchange market, so you can imagine my challenges. I found this very, very insightful, and let's hope for not a delayed election. And thank you to everyone who attended.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.